I'm Carolina. I'm here with Spark Network, and we have our first interviewee. I'm very excited to have Eamonn Store today. Eamonn Store is the founder of FairShare. FairShare, basically works with business leaders, entrepreneurs, companies in creating strategy on how to get involved in social impact. Funny enough, Eamonn and I met kind of doing something in food together. We were both volunteering at a food pantry here in New York, and then ended up breaking bread and being in conversation at dinner. So, no surprise there. Food is always a unifier. It plays such an important role in like so many different aspects of life. So I'll stop talking because I want you to share more about yourself. But yeah, tell us a little bit about your professional life and why you decided to start a company like FairShare.
Yeah, I was actually, I guess my life's been a mixture of different things, but I had a sort of unexpected start in life because I was a failed helicopter pilot. I didn't really know what to do when I left school. I had a really odd choice. I could either go to art school or I also had a acceptance to join the Royal Navy as a pilot. And I guess they're not really kindred, they're not really even close in choices. Do I go to sort of art school and spend years there and, I don't know, get stoned for a few years and explore art, or do I go and do the opposite and go and join? So I joined the Royal Navy, and I was a helicopter pilot. Wasn't a very good one. Got in a couple of scrapes in that. Left, and I didn't know what to do. And I really didn't know what to do. And I ended up just through really word of mouth joining an advertising agency because I guess I was quite confident. You kind of get trained with confidence in any force, any of the forces. Right. So I could sort of stand up and I could talk and I could, entertain clients in a pub. And right. Back in the day, that's what account handlers did. So I started in advertising and I ended up doing that for quite a long time, quite a big part of my life. I ended up moving to the US, doing that best part of sort of 28 years or something in advertising. And I traveled all around the world. I did 86 countries, worked for WPP. And my superpower, if you like, was simplifying kind of different complex cultural and media issues for CMOs and clients who just needed someone to explain to them what was going on in different countries.
Right.
And I sort of I sort of had a midlife event where I just found myself just working in an industry that was all about selling more services to clients, and I kind of increasingly felt clients didn't really need them. So I got to my sort of mid-40s and I was kind of in this place of like, what's life about? I've got a big house and I had a boat and I flew around the world, in first class, and all of those material things that I kind of aspired to as a kind of post-Thatcher, kid in the UK. And I kind of like, what's it all about? And I found myself sort of increasingly questioning that. And I had a very fortunate, I was lucky to have a great mentor, a woman called Helen Mumford-Sole, and she kind of mentored me through that. And I went from one extreme to the other. I went from being, working for a big ad agency that's very good at making money, and I don't think has any deep sense of value or values. Right. I went and joined The Guardian. I ran The Guardian in North America for a few years, 3 years. And the complete opposite, over a century of like deeply entrenched values of journalism as quality independent journalism, not very good at making money. So I took my skills from WPP and to a business that needed to flip. I did 3 years at The Guardian. We grew the audience, we tripled the revenue, and that's what led to FairShare, because the first time in my life I felt I could stand up and represent something that I really cared about, like right. really passionate about. And FairShare was really the evolution of that. It was like, I had a belief, not all journalists at The Guardian are optimists, but I had a belief that actually corporate America wants to do more good in the world, right? There are leaders of corporations that want to have greater purpose in their businesses. And their issue is they just don't execute on it very well. They tend to, those boardroom directives, whether you're Unilever or P&G or Coca-Cola or Microsoft, the direction that companies want to go in, when it gets handed down to marketing and corporate comms, the execution is not so good. right? And that's what we said we would do when we set up FareShare. We help well-intentioned leaders of corporations better execute on those intentions. So if you really care about addiction, you really care about food security and homelessness and race and the planet, the environment, if you really care about those things as a corporation, you can write checks to Save the Children, you can write checks to UNICEF, you can write checks to Greenpeace, you can do all those things. You don't need us to help you do that. But if you really want to get into the work and you want your employees to live it and feel it, and you want to have a contribution as a company, what your superpowers are as a company to change that, then that's what we do, right? And so we know a lot of nonprofits. We know a lot of entrepreneurs and impact entrepreneurs who are right there at the coalface doing amazing work. And we find corporations, big and small, that want to like lock in on that, not just as a financial thing to write a check and be able to put it in their PR and their annual report, but for their employees to actually get involved and do stuff. And I think increasingly, you know, at this point in time, we've gone through lots of different bits of work. We're a very small company and we work only in areas that we're passionate about, but youth and food, youth, food and race right now are huge. It's super engaging to work with the youth and to what we learn from them and the power of and excitement from that. So that's kind of what FareShare does. You know, we just happen to be doing a lot of stuff around food security right now, some of it with you, right? You're fledgling.
Well, there's a couple things that you mentioned. That you were in kind of going back to the early years of you. And I always have to ask about food, but like food in the Navy. Talk to me about that and like those meals. And like, you know, you also referenced you were in boarding school like pretty early on. I loved that story that I want you to share about the speed at which you eat food and why. But kind of want to touch on those things, and then we'll talk about like family stuff, and then of course food and FareShare and sort of what you just spoke to.
Food in the Navy was pretty good, but as a kid, I don't think we realized at the time. As a kid, we grew up in the 70s, which was, I think, kind of the bastion of artificial ingredients, like kids sweet. Remember the space dust? That stuff you used to put in your mouth, and it would like crackle like crazy, and kids used to die because they ate 10 packets of it and stuff. But you know, I grew up with with an English father and an Irish mother, and I have one cousin on my English side and I have 26 on my Irish side. So family food was a big thing, right? Gathering around food. If you're Irish from that era, gathering around food and alcohol is a combined thing. But certainly it's that equivalent of family style. But my aunt, my mother and her sisters came from Donegal, but my aunt was at the time, I think people thought she was like kind of a crackpot, but she was super into organic food in the 70s. She used to bake her own bread. You know, she was always talking about various organic ingredients that no one could spell or find. They were very niche things in like one shop in the whole of Hampshire that you would find it. And, you know, I look at her and she's bouncing around at like 84 now, right?
Yeah,
like a 60-year-old. So we grew up. My mother had a food business. My mother and my aunt actually both had a food business, like a catering business. And they catered for like big events and weddings and social events, and it was really just their own joy. It wasn't like a business they needed to succeed. They both had husbands who were good, you know, had were primary income earners, but it was their passion. And actually, interestingly, over the years, that passion became the dominant business in both families. Like the passion of the food. Eventually, my father's business, you know, became smaller. He retired, and my mother's business kept growing, and my aunt was the same. So food has always played. It's always been a big part of our family about how we gather and convene around it. I've always understood that to be a really important thing. But actually, boarding school was where I learned to eat fast. You know, as I said to you in a previous conversation, boarding school was when I went to boarding school young. I was 10, and at boarding school, I'm 6'4" now, but I was a very skinny 6 foot, like 14-year-old, and we played a lot of rugby. And so food was getting as much food in you as you could was important. So we literally would just the faster you ate, the more you could get in, right? In the time you had when there's 300 boys in one dining hall. You know, the funny thing about the Navy is when I left and joined the Navy, food is pretty important actually. The quality of the food was better than you would think. You know, there's various phrases about, you know, an army marches on its belly, you know, on the.
I don't think I've heard that one.
So you feed soldiers, they go further, you know, they have energy. So, and it's the same in any military. So being well fed was important. But also travel, we got to try, you know, you got to see different cultures and foods as well. I mean, the highlight of the Navy was even when I was there, which is not, I mean, I guess it's a while ago now, but not, you know, you still got a tot of rum every day and you could save up your rum and drink it all at the end of the week in one go. That was fun.
Oh, wow.
But, you know, they still had Pusser's, I think they still do actually, but they still had Pusser's rum, which goes back to like pre-Nelson, you know, as a tradition.
When you have like your family gatherings, I was like, you know, food is important, but does it have to taste good?
We did mess up plenty of dinners because as an Irish family, Christmas Day started in the pub, right? As the whole neighborhood did. You know, and sometimes you get carried away and you leave an hour or two later than you should and things get burned. But that was all fun. That was part of the fun. It was like, you know, you would come home and it wasn't about perfection. As it never is actually with our family when we eat. It's not about perfection. It's about it's about community.
Yeah.
It's no surprise that, you know, the non-profits we work with around food, whether it's like Breaking Bread, which is, you know, what you do, or whether it's around a Better Life Foundation or groups like that, we tend to gravitate as a company because we pick the things we do, if you like, we gravitate around those same sort of principles. It's about street food. It's about feeding the underserved. It's about getting it just. It's about using food as a convener of people, not just as a source of nourishment.
Culture and people, you said you traveled over 80 countries. Is there a place that you traveled that you're like, this is the best food? Annoying question, such an annoying question, but.
I always found the way to break through to real trust, working in different markets, is around food. Yeah. You'll always be an outsider until you go out and eat with them. And I was always a big fan of, typically, you go to India, you go to Mumbai, you go to Indonesia, you go to any of those countries, and they'll always assume you want to go to the safe Western restaurant. They actually really want to take you. They really want to take you to the local one. But as soon as they get a glimpse, right, that you're the guy that's up for the local stuff, they love it. Yeah. And I was always that. Because I loved it, but also because I knew that's how I got unique relationships to build. So I was always the guy that's like, no, I don't want to go to the 5-star whatever in the Mandarin Oriental. Let's get out on the street. And I can remember, you know, eating street food in Indonesia, like literally sitting on the pavement with all these little tuk-tuks and crazy things going around you. And I was just like loving it. And I can honestly say, and I think I have a reasonably good constitution, I don't ever remember getting sick in all of those years that I traveled. Actually, once in Moscow. I got food poisoning in Moscow. I don't know that was an accident. That's a whole different story.
Like, that's great. And so, you know, there's some projects that I know you're working with through Fair Share. Sustainable, I think, is specifically very connected to food and land and community and accessibility. And I want to tell us about that.
Well, there's some work that we do, which is more in the impact space, and then there's work we do sort of connecting impact to commercial. So, you know, I was shocked, and it still shocks me in America when you look at food that's provided in hospitals, for example. You go in for treatment. Like this is supposed to be a place of wellness and health. Like it's supposed to be a place where you get better. Like who thinks that stuff through? Like, why do you get the food you get in hospitals? we do a lot of work in prisons. I sit on the board of Defy Ventures. We work with incarcerated men and women. We work primarily with in different prisons in the tri-state where we go in and teach. Same applies. Like, why do people in those institutions deserve that quality of food? What is in our interests to malnourish people in that way? Schools, you can look at as the same. So we do work in those areas. We work in criminal justice reform. You know, I'm fascinated. I've always been fascinated working in the prisons at the quality of food that inmates can create in their own cells. Literally with like a tin, and it's just there's brilliant stories if you follow what's that brilliant podcast, Ear Hustle, you know, Quentin in California. You know, it's well worth listening to, but the way that prisoners can hack solutions to things is fascinating. I actually think it's a big opportunity for companies to rethink how we employ men and women as they come out of incarceration, because they have the ones that I've met, 90% of them are upstanding, really good people that really want to work hard, incredible loyalty, and in many cases have taken sentences way in excess of what they deserve. And we're seeing the implications of that now. We're seeing about the issues around institutional racism in America, and how this isn't an issue we created. It's an issue we inherited. It's centuries old, about suppression of Black people in America. So almost any issue you look at, many of them you can bring back to food in some sense. Why do low-income communities have such poor options?
Right.
Why can they buy so much bad food so cheaply? Right? Why
is there sugar in everything?
Why is there sugar in everything? Even when I come back to the UK, or just come back to Europe, or possibly just come back to anywhere else in the world, right? Why does bread taste so different?
Right.
Why is there so much sugar in it? Why do our animals taste different? Why is beef taste so different? So there are many things that don't make sense to me. They make sense only in a manner which is, I can only believe that so much in our food supply chain comes back to special interests and lobbying and industries.
Yeah.
And I just find that in one sense it makes me sad, and in another sense it gives us kind of conviction to say, like, there are better options. Like what you're doing, right, with which is why I love it so much, with Breaking Bread, is taking nourishing, healthy, and in most instances vegan food to communities that to underserved communities. They never get that chance to taste it, let alone understand like the properties of it.
Right.
And it shouldn't be that difficult. It shouldn't be that difficult to do these things.
Do you think can companies, I guess specifically food companies, can take a better stance of, is there a way to go anti-lobbying of sugar? Like, what can companies do, or how can change happen within what you just spoke about? Like, I think about that a lot.
I mean, the most powerful change that could happen is the power of the investment in special interest is legislated. In other countries it is.
Yeah.
In other countries you can't. In this country I happen to be in right now, you can't advertise pharmaceutical products, right? So I'm not saying that I'm anti educating people about pharmaceutical products, but there are reasons why maybe it's not a good thing, right? Maybe it's not a good thing to encourage. There are reasons why America are world champions in certain sports. Obesity is one, diabetes is another, heart issues is another. All these things, like why are we so uniquely skilled at developing those illnesses?
Right.
It surely isn't just because Americans genetically unhealthy. It's because we're just pumped with this stuff, and there is so much less legislation and education around other options. And I think there's two ways you can deal with that. One is top down, and there are bodies that deal with that. There are lawyers that dedicate their life and time to trying to change legislation, and the other one is bottom up, which is what you do, and what I try and do is to try and pull those two together to some degree, like
Right.
to try and empower those grassroots organisations, whether it's through CSA boxes or education or getting chefs to work with communities, powered by corporations that will step up and sponsor them. The Unilevers of this world, the Procter and Gambles of this world, are looking to buy more B Corps. They want to buy more of those companies that have a greater commitment both to the environment and to people's health. So the more that things like B Corps become, we saw the world sort of started to get to grips with it a bit with things like fair trade, and the more that food companies try and become B Corps, and Danone is a great example of that, right? They're by no means the gold standard, but actually they're the largest corporation, I think, that, as a packaged goods corporation, I think they're the largest one still that has gone through all of that change in their corporation and supply chain to become a B Corp, and that's just the beginning. Hopefully that we see that movement kind of grow, and companies gradually, bigger companies, start to take this more seriously. Ultimately, it's our kids that is what's kind of going to drive this. And I think,
Well, you work with Unplugged, and they're made up of how many kids? I think about the future are the kids, and they're so with it. And
what, Civics Unplugged?
Yeah, Civics Unplugged. Yeah.
I mean, Civics Unplugged is for anyone that's watching this, is an amazing non-profit. I beg anyone to go and look at it. I should have worn the T-shirt today. But, it is a collection of youth from every state in America. It's interesting that it defaults to being about 70% female, but all different ethnicities, all different social classes. And the way I describe Civics Unplugged is it's basically, it accepts that whoever gets into the presidency next and the next two times, the world really doesn't change that dramatically. The system is so entrenched in special interests and lobbying and sponsorship and funding, and the whole principle of Civics Unplugged is you gracefully create grassroots up from a high school upwards, a movement of youth that learn civic duty, learn how to write policy, learn how to debate, learn how to reach across differences, and that's why it's so important. They're from different cultures, classes, ethnicities. With the idea that actually you're not going to fix these, the issues of America are not going to be fixed in the next two elections, but actually maybe in three, these kids at high school will now be old enough, right, to be in positions of power. Not necessarily to be running for the White House, although I'm fairly convinced that they will. And I really believe that actually Civics Unplugged youth will be in dominant places of power, just having worked with them and seen how amazing they are at the ages they're at. But it's also about how you get them into local leadership, local civics, because it's so important. It's not just important having a new president with a new with a if you like a healthier appetite for democracy is not just a solution. It's about how you build it into the cities and the states where still so much can be done.
What can businesses do? What can us as individuals do, you think?
At the moment, I think there's I guess there's sort of three things that I think are just really not that difficult to do individually that could have so much impact. One is find a thing you can feel comfortable or uncomfortable with and go and volunteer with it.
Right.
Whether that's for me, it was going to prison, right? I'm very open. The first reason I went to prison, because I've never been to prison, I thought, I don't know, I want to go see what it's like when they shut the door, and is it really like you think it is? So I think I went like a lot of people go. You know, I went out of sort of curiosity, and then I sort of got the bug, you know, because you realise this is something I can really, you know, it's just something where you go, I can really make an impact for these people. I can really help. So I had the same thing when I went to I did a community event in Bed-Stuy around there. Like I remember like I was in that. Of course, I'll come and judge this thing, and I'd love to work with these kids, and it's gonna be super cool. And I pull up in my Audi outside, and my first reaction is my car okay here? You know, and so you've still got, even with the work we do, you still have this sort of bias in you of like what you're thinking versus what your outside persona is. And I went in there, and I was sort of working with these kids. We did like a whole day in there, and I was like, yeah, just so enamored by the hustle, right? It wasn't about it's like, you know, some of these kids aren't even getting a half decent education. Some of them aren't even getting fed, you know, a half nutritious meal. But it was the hustle I was intrigued in. It's like, you know what, you guys, if I was hiring people, I will hire you because you've got that street hustle that I love. But I felt, I felt, and I still, it doesn't wear off on me when I go back there. I still feel so sad when I get back in my car and I drive through that neighborhood in the middle of summer when it's like 100 degrees, you know, and you just see kids sitting on steps and they literally have nothing to do. Yeah. Like it's these, and I'm saying that I'm not talking about teenagers that, you know, well, you could be playing basketball, you could be doing this, like young kids. And I remember it so vividly, sitting in my car, in my air-conditioned car, looking at these kids in the bottom of these projects, and they're literally just sitting there looking at concrete in front of them. I'm thinking, like, what? There must be something we can do, even with 10 of them. So volunteering is a big one. I think at the moment, it's really important to support family-owned businesses.
Three.
Quickly. Explore nutrition as explore food as healthy nutrition. We have, you know, US is a country that goes to, we're not really very good at prevention. We're very good at, we love to go to treatment. We love to prescribe stuff. We don't, like, there is so much to learn from just the nutritional medicinal benefits of just healthy food. It's not about having to go and get organic food all the time, right? Or be shopping in the expensive aisle of Whole Foods. But it's about paying more attention to what you're putting in your body. It's about understanding, like, there is so much to learn. That I get very passionate. There is so much to learn from the medicines and the tribal knowledge that we have in thousands of years of indigenous communities, tribes, Eastern medicine. You know, we talked about, you know, the whole health and well-being in America and how it's a very, like, wealthy, middle-class, white thing. You know, we all the mums go in the soul cycle and stuff like that. But people forget that, well, we're ignorant to the fact that those things that serve us. I've been having this argument with my own family recently, and actually my own daughter, just talking about breathing, right? And the power of breathing. Wim Hof, the Dutch guy that's, you know, big on this. But all of these things are thousands of years old. You know, I can't remember, Mitch Anderson at Amazon Front Lines, right, is down in, you know, he's a Stanford, you know, educated guy that went down to the Ecuadorian Amazon and married a tribeswoman. And he spoke so powerfully the other day about how the tribal elders in the Ecuadorian Amazon weren't just being ignored through COVID-19. It was like almost like it was almost like a form of ethnic cleansing, right? If you can put it into the jungles, they can wipe themselves out. But the amazing stories that Mitch tells, which are so powerful, is how the tribal elders pulled together the ingredients of the jungle and have been curing themselves. Why do we not know this?
Yeah, mind blowing.
We're talking about times for a vaccine. We're talking about all these things in America. But why do we not know these things, or why do we seem so uninterested in it? And
Yeah.
I know friends of mine that had cancer and gone on a macrobiotic diet and cured themselves, and they go back to Sloan Kettering. I'm probably using the wrong hospital example, so ignore the name. But they went back to their hospital, which was a cancer specialist, and said, and the hospital's like, the doctor's like, oh my God, I don't understand this. You're in remission and you're cured. And it's like, do you not want to know why? You're good to go.
Right.
It's not my stats. You're not my patient. It doesn't count for me. But so I'm labouring the point. But I think there is. I have so much. I follow the rule of do as I say, not as I do. Right. So my own food intake is not exactly will not exactly win me awards. Right. But I do think much more carefully about, not about is it healthy and is it low in this or low in that, but is it natural?
Right.
Does it?
I think about joy also, food and joy, and I associate that with healthy as well. Yeah. I think there's no undervaluing that thought as well. But that's a perfect segue into, with these interviews, I want to always ask 5 questions. What food brings you joy is one. What is your favorite dish to share?
Okay.
Your most sensual food, describe that. Who is your favorite person to cook with and why? And lastly, 3 people, dead or alive, you'd want at your dinner.
Let's do, most sensual food is oysters. I sort of love the James Bondishness of like shaken not stirred. I just love, if I'm going to sit and eat oysters, I'm in a certain mindset already. What's the next question? Which order?
What food brings you joy? But it's almost the same thing. But if you have a different answer, then sweet.
What brings me joy? I would say that I wouldn't go far off that track. I would say that crustacea brings me joy in terms of accompaniment. So I would say I like oysters and fries don't quite work for me. Moule frite, adore. Like cooking together with friends, adore. Like sitting on beaches, I'm a water baby. I'm happiest when I'm on water, near it, on a beach. Yeah. I think because of that, I've always loved not necessarily fish, but crustacea, seafood. It gives me a feeling of decadence, of sensuality, and importantly, I never feel full at the end of it, and I like that feeling because I'm a bit of a Labrador dog. If you put big lumps of food in front of me, I'll eat them and then feel sick. So I kind of feel like crustacea. I always feel like at the end of it, I feel like, yeah, I've had a really lovely food and I don't feel stuffed and want to go to sleep.
All right, sweet. Next question. What is your favorite dish to share?
Oh God, I think I've just said it. Moule frite, probably.
2 more. Who is your favorite person to cook with and why? And then who's at your dinner table? What 3 people, dead or alive, are at your dinner?
A favorite person to cook with. Do you know what? I'm going to embarrass you now. I think you're one of my favorite people to cook with. Okay. Here's why. I've always been fascinated when I sit in an American bar in your restaurant. I'm always fascinated how you run your kitchen. It's always calm. Like your people always seem to love you. Like they're there because they love you, right? When we've cooked together, I always feel like I'm not being judged. And I always find you teach me something really simple, like just bringing simple things together that taste so delicious. And I'm always like, how did you do that? So I think there's always something to be said for cooking with chefs. Like there's a real difference between cooking with a friend that's like, hey, this is fun, and different moods of different friends, versus someone who has studied it as a craft. And I don't know, I still can't articulate why the food tastes so different. I still can't articulate when you taught me the most simple tomato-based marinara sauce, why Freddie and my younger kids just like love it. You know, they just there's just that magic that chefs have.
Eamonn tried to get credit for that, and it's not working.
Yeah. So there you go. I try and call it my own special sauce, and they go, no, it's not yours. It's Caro. Caro taught you that.
And then the last question: who is at your dinner table?
Who will be at my dinner table? I would. I never knew my grandfather, but I have a very clear picture in my head. He's like this sort of Churchillian kind of character. And he was a big pillar of the community where I grew up, and so was a very memorable person, and was a you know how people say that traits skip generations in families. My grandfather was crazy about sport. My father was not a sportsman. He was very good at other things, and then I was a big rugby player as a kid, and I always wished that I'd had that grandfather that would come and watch and like talk about the game. So I would love to, and maybe he's on my mind because I'm in England and going through family stuff, but I always think of him as this sort of big cigar smoking kind of sort of big Churchillian kind of character, and I would love to sit and dine with him. And I think I would definitely put him with Keith Richards, who some would argue is dead. He's still alive, unreliably informed, but you know, just such a. I'm just fascinated by Keith Richards, his book, his life, and I don't know how the hell Keith and my grandfather are going to get on, but somehow I think they're going to be pretty good. And then I was thinking, what would my third be? You know, what would your third be? And you know, it's really crass. I don't know. It feels really, say like the Dalai Lama or Gandhi or something. Yes, I'd be fascinated to meet those people, and I would love to meet them. But I always try and think of like something a bit more maybe ambitious than that. And so I'm not quite sure who my third would be, but I think it would probably be one of the crew. It would be someone young. And I was sort of thinking, actually, one of the people I love dining with one-on-one in non-family environments, one of the people I love dining with the most is my daughter. Because I just find fascinating conversations come from youth. And it would be, I would put, you know, Keith and my grandfather, who would now be 100 old, Keith's nearly 100 odd, and then I'd throw someone in there like provocative and young that would kind of throw it all around a bit. Maybe you would be there. Maybe I'd throw you in there as that youth. Okay. Yeah. You're young. But I've already had you as my chef, so I can't have the chef and you there twice, can I? Yeah, so maybe I don't know. I haven't quite got my third one right, I don't think. Okay. But certainly my granddad and Keith Richards, I think, would be a pretty good start.
Okay. Well, then, before we say goodbye, what's for dinner tonight? Do you know?
Oh, crikey. You know, I actually don't know what's for dinner tonight. What I will say is, when I come back to the UK, I go through the same pattern of eating every time. I come back, and I don't know if these things will mean anything. I eat sausage rolls, I eat Scotch eggs, I eat Walker's crisps, I eat Cadbury's chocolate. Poppy's the same. My daughter's here with me. We literally just gouge on all those things we've missed in America that you just can't get or don't taste the same. And it always happens the same. I feel like heavy and slow. Yeah. Having talked about the importance of putting healthy, nutritious food in your body, and so now I've gone through that natural back in the UK unhealthy eating, and my body's like craving healthy food. Like I had lentil shepherd's pie last night. It was amazing. My sister cooked, So I can feel my body's like craving veggies.
Okay.
It's going to be something veggie, healthy veggie, and the veggies around here are so healthy and nutritious. So it's going to be something like that.
Sweet. Can't wait to hear about it. Well, thank you so much for joining us.
That was so much fun.